Muy buenos días a todos y todas. Es un gusto saludarles y
Good
darles la
morning. It's a great pleasure to greet you and welcome you to the 2023 Regional Forum, Strengthening the Value Proposal of Financial Inclusion for Women, organized by Red Camif, Fin Equity, ALC, and that is Mujeres en Portal FinDev. SIGAP has convened this meeting. My name is Mariana Martinez. I am the regional leader of FINDEV. We also have with us Andrea Rosales, who is responsible for communications and training at Red Camif. Good morning, Andrea.
Buenos días, Mariana. Buenos días a toda la
Good
audiencia.
morning, Mariana. Good morning to the entire audience. It's a great pleasure to have you here. You have been essential in this meeting. We also have my CGAP colleague, Daniel Contreras, who will help us with the technical aspects of this event. Hi, Daniel, how are you? Hi, Mariana, hi all. Thank you for being here. We also have my colleague from Portal FinDev, Virginia Brown, who will be supporting us in the rooms. Hi, Virginia. Thank you, Mariana, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for being here, Virginia. While we are letting you in, let me tell you that we have a participation plan today with more than 700 colleagues that were registered. We're going to share some recommendations so that your participation these 2 days will be very productive. Let me tell you that if you're going to use the side-by-side in Zoom, this will allow you to see both the speaker and the presentation. We encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat box. Many of you are doing so already, and you are greeting from Ecuador and many other places from Latin America. We encourage you to continue to do so. During the group sessions, you will be able to use your videos and microphones, but during the plenary sessions, you will only be able to ask questions through the chat box. We encourage you to use your full name and the name of your organization through the function of change name. We have the next slide where we show you how you can rename yourselves. You have to click on the 3 dots and then select rename and write your name and your institution. In this event, we are going to have with simultaneous interpretation into English. If you would prefer to listen to the event in this language, you have to select interpretation in the lower bar and then select English.
If you prefer to listen in English, then you have to select interpretation in your sub-navigation bar and then select the English option. Si prefieren escuchar en español, no tienen que hacer
If you
nada.
want to listen into Spanish, you don't have to do anything, just stay in this channel. This event wouldn't be possible without our strategic partners, Red Camif and national networks, and the organizations that appear on your screen, including the Centro MIPE, UN Women, Organization for Migration. Thank you for your cooperation and your partnership so that this can become a reality. And now we are going to have a video so that we can know more about the work that these organizations are doing to empower women in the Latin American region and in the Caribbean. So Daniel, we give you the floor so that you can present the video.
PRODEL S.A., con más de 25 años en la industria de microfinanzas en Nicaragua. Impulsa la inclusión
More than 25 years in Nicaragua, promoting financial inclusion of women and economic impact. Experience with cacao producers. My name is Noemi Medrano. I am from Los Rios community. I have been part of this project since I started. This has been a great advantage for me. I am using new methods that I didn't know about before. With the talks that I've received, I have been able to work with cocoa tomato, chilcoma, and I had never worked with cucumber, but I was able to do so, and it has been a great experience. I really like it. Serinsa Inclusive Services. Who are we? We are a company that promotes commercialization of microinsurance, promoting financial inclusion through products and services. Our services, technical assistance, integrated information systems, and financial education. Timeline, this is how we've grown through the years. The timeline of how we grown continues. Benefits for service providers. Increase of their products and services, partnerships with great support, and this is the Inclusive Microinsurance Promoting Network. Serinsa Partners. Board of Directors. Serinsa employees. Our achievements. Our working program. Please contact us to this address, telephone, and email. I hope that you have felt inspired with these videos. We have a lot of experiences and lessons learned to share in this forum, so we are going to speak about the agenda that we are going to have today. We are going to have the welcoming words by Red Camif, then the main conference by IDB Invest, overview of the gender gap and sustainable initiatives. We are going to have different break rooms. We are going to speak in the first one about climate change and food security, the second one, financial health, and then migration and remittances. And then we come back to the plenary session to close for today and get ready for day 2. So I'm going to ask Juan Pablo Montoya, who is the president of Red Camif, to give us the welcoming words and tell us about the objectives of this forum. Good morning, dear friends and colleagues. Today we are meeting to discuss a vital issue, the financial inclusion of women as an important aspect of the economic development in our society. We need to recognize that if we want to advance to an equitable future, we need to guarantee the fair and equitable participation of all people, regardless of gender. However, we need to highlight that women have been facing great challenges and barriers. These barriers limit to their access to financial services to achieve their full economic development. That is why these days we will be reflecting on different aspects of financial inclusion, including access to resources, because women's participation is essential, and by strengthening their financial capacity, we provide them with resources to improve their households, which contributes to the growth of the economy. Financial inclusion empowers women to make their own decisions. They become more independent and able to make decisions which benefit their communities and improves their quality of life with a positive impact on society. The elimination of gender inequality is a tool that helps provide women the same opportunities as men. This is not only fair, but also has a positive impact on the socioeconomic dynamic of communities. Financial resilience. Usually, women face unique challenges like the interruption of their careers due to family responsibilities. We need to develop products and services that adapt to the needs of women so that they can better face their challenges and have better financial resilience. Innovation and economic growth. It benefits women and also promotes general innovation and growth. Women are active agents in the economy, and by having their full participation, we have a better outlook because they promote investment and economic progress. Strengthening the financial inclusion of women is both an issue of equality and a smart strategy as well. By providing women with the needed financial tools, we build a more equitable society. I invite you to get committed to this cause and work together to achieve a future in which financial inclusion can become a reality for all women. I would like to thank each of you for being with us in this learning experience and this space for sharing lessons learned. Thank you for the support of our partners. I wish you the best of luck and success in this couple of days. May you have a great day during the development of this forum. Thank you very much, Juan Pablo, for your invitation to work together so that this can become a reality for all women. So we are going to give the first step with the main conference of this regional forum. We have Armando Simon, who is the lead officer for investment at IDB Invest. How are you, Armando? Great, Mariana. Thank you. Good morning. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you, and I would like to thank Juan Pablo Montoya, who is the president of Red Camif, Araceli Castillo, the executive director of Red Camif, Andrea Rosales, and the entire team for the invitation to participate in this forum. Thank you, Fernando. We will be speaking about the overview of the gender gap and sustainable initiatives in Latin America and the Caribbean from the point of view of IDB Invest. You will be able to participate in this conversation by sending your questions in the chat box, and we will be able to integrate you into the talk. So you will be able to post your questions there. So let's start with our conversation. I wanted to tell Armando that we have great evidence that financial services for women strengthen their financial participation and has a multiplying effect for their families and children, as Juan Pablo said in his welcoming remarks. However, finding financing is a challenge, and it's a great opportunity that has not been explored by financial service providers. This is something that they don't see as a good investment case. So I would like to ask Armando to tell us what are the main barriers that you see that women are facing on the side of the demand that prevent their access to financial services according to their needs. Thank you, Mariana. I am going to show my presentation now. Let me answer that question. I agree with what Juan Pablo has said. It's not an issue of a gender gap. We need to take a look at gender inequality first. It goes beyond that. We need to balance the system. One of the main barriers that we see, well, there are several, but the main one is that access to credit for women is less than the entire region. It's not the same access. There are unequal conditions for a variety of reasons. Typically, what we see is that although there's lack of access, whenever there's access, there are more restrictions for many reasons. Women in general don't have the same credit history. Perhaps they don't have the same access to assets, among many things. That's the first barrier that I can see. And although there have been progresses made in terms of the supply of credit in the sector, we believe that there's still a lot to do in terms of financial solutions that are specific for women. Women in general, we need to understand their sector. We need to offer them solutions that adapt to their own situation, like flexible terms, specific requirements that adapt to them. So I would say that is missing is to understand this in depth and provide a value proposal that is specific to them. The other thing is the lack of collateral or guarantees for loans. Not all of them have assets, and sometimes the assets are not in their name. So it's very difficult that they can pledge these assets in order to get a loan. Another important part here is labor conditions. Close to 60% of women in Latin America have informal jobs with income that is less predictable or perhaps volatile, and this makes it difficult to get a credit or loan. Education is also something that we need to emphasize on because it's an issue that we see over and over again. Digital education, there is a clear lack of digital education. And since this is a digital world, you don't get those skills or tools to manage the platform. So that's a limiting factor for their progress and development. And also financial education and its relationship with financial inclusion. Sometimes there's reluctance to come to the financial institutions to get a loan because they really don't know what are the consequences or they don't know how to use the loan or credit. That's why it's important to provide financial education as an empowering factor to create individual and family well-being. Finally, an important aspect is unpaid work. 75% of that unpaid work at home is absorbed by women, and that also results in a gap in terms of professional growth and development among women. When they have children or there's a family, when they want to go back to the labor market, they face considerable challenges because there's a large period that they missed out on because of their families. In fact, I was in a conference with a colleague of another multilateral organization, and he was saying that perhaps one of the solutions is to rethink how we see this type of topics. If this happens because the law, in some countries, not in all, the law gives only a few days as maternity period. So the women are the ones who need to absorb this unpaid work, but it should be the same between men and women. So going back to that, there's a lot to understand and think regarding the main barriers. Armando, I agree with Raul Gomez's comment in the chat box that said that gender-based violence could be another significant barrier for women's participation. Yes, in fact, it was one of the next aspects, what we microaggressions. In general, women are subject to a higher level than men to microaggressions, to violence, where they are questioned on their emotional state. They are questioned on many things that are out of place, honestly. And what this results on is lack of professional progress. Yes, I wanted to say, Armando, that you've mentioned that obviously there are other women who are in leadership positions. We see in the region and worldwide that women are underrepresented in many areas, including in the financial sector. Among managers and board of directors, they are underrepresented. What are the barriers that limit the access of women to these levels, and how can we break them down? Let me tell you, it goes back to the issue of inequality. It is very clear. There is inequality, mainly in terms of income, development, and leadership. And on these three aspects, the key that we need to highlight is that women in the region earn 75% in average of what men earn, whether or not they have the same position. This is evident in many industries and in many countries. I was mentioning microaggressions, harassment, and so on. This has an impact in terms of labor development. To the effects of leadership, this is one of those figures that speaks about that gap. Only 28% of higher management positions is represented by women. And there's a great gap of opportunity to balance that. And finally, something important, per 100 men promoted, only 86 women are promoted. This can be explained by two things. There's a bias, an implicit bias, where women are hired based on their achievements and men based on their potential. What does it tell you? Basically, you're saying that you are not giving a value to women's potential. The performance bias, as it's called. Yes, as you very well said, we see that clients and women need products that adapt to their financial needs, and many times the creation of these products face different difficulties in the decision-making process for the product. I wanted to ask you regarding the participation of women in leadership. Do you think that there have been progresses in the design of products that adapt to women? Do we still lack this type of products? Good question, Mariana. Not everything is bad, of course. Progresses have been made mainly in Latin America. But I would speak about three types of financial intermediaries from the point of view of product supply. Some of them are the least advanced, and they are doing what we call the pink wash. They have a portfolio, and it turns out that part of this credit portfolio is for women. And they say that they are making an effort, but there's nothing behind that. There's no specific coverage strategy. There's no specific strategy for the growth of this portfolio for women. It's just to give you a label that we are working for women without actually doing so. The second level is when there's actually a value proposal. There is an actual foundation in terms of a strategy by financial institutions where they say that they want to cover certain sectors and create an offer, a product that adapts to the needs of women or of vulnerable groups of women in general. And the third level, which is the most sophisticated level, is when there's a value proposal that is a real one, a holistic one, when it's not just the product that is adapted for women, but also there are platforms, non-financial services. There are other platforms that allow this interaction among leaders, among group of women, in order to create healthy growth, healthy financial education. It's a combination of financial and non-financial products. So I think that there's where we need to develop that still, and not only at banks, but also on all types of financial, microfinancial institutions, non-remunerated financial institutions in Latin America.
Hay que adoptar un enfoque de diseño con inteligencia de género, es decir, que se base en investigaciones cuantitativas y cualitativas, centrarnos en la creación de valor para las mujeres, y eso se logra con una recolección de datos desagregados por sexo y que sean utilizados en el diseño del producto. ¿Qué está pasando con esa recolección de datos a nivel regional?
Mira, lo interesante es que sí se recolectan, sí.
What's interesting is that this is being collected. These are the percentages in the presentation. There are there's a significant interest to collect data. What we don't have is, or rather what I have not seen, is an infrastructure to process this data. So how do you understand this segment that is so important, the 50% of the population, generally speaking, if you're not able to process the data? You have the data, but you can do nothing with it regarding understanding the information or finding trends vis-a-vis creating a value proposal. So what we believe is that there is an existing need to create this infrastructure to process and automate the data. Now, what is it that we have seen in some countries? Well, in the case of Mexico, for example, we recently saw the new requirements for banks. This was published to report information that is disaggregated from different portfolios and with specific metrics with data disaggregated by gender. I think this is a significant step forward. This is something key given the need to close the gap and to make better investments with the gender approach, among other things. Now, this implies for banks in general and for institutions and for reporting entities. But what happens with non-reporting entities? Well, I think we also need to address this gap in these cases. So it's not just for large banks and institutions, but rather it should apply to everyone. They should create this infrastructure as well. We'll continue talking about this information on data in the working groups in this 2-day forum, but I wanted you to tell us whether you think this data can help the sector to understand the impact that financial inclusion services have in the lives of women and how and what is happening now. Well, can they help? Yes, they certainly can help. I think that's the first step. And I insist that the most important thing is to understand the market. Or rather, although in an ideal world, what you do is you understand the market vis-a-vis a better service provision or giving better coverage, you have to create specific products for women. But the first thing you need is to have the information. So this is where I would place a lot of emphasis. Thank you, Armando. I would like to add a question that we have, or a comment that we have from Rebecca, and it's a question on the products. When we're talking about the product design specifically for women, she's asking whether you have products that are holistically for women or which percentage of them are created for women. I think that your presentation had some information about this. Could you please elaborate? Yes, we can get to this in a moment, but what I can share with you is very broad. The spectrum is very broad. There's a long way to go. It's a minority of products that have been specifically made for women. This is lacking. But what have we seen in countries like Mexico or Brazil, where there's already a service that is a bit more developed for these types of financial institutions and for credit entities, for women banking? Well, this comes through fintech. These are very specific products with specific platforms that have certain capabilities that are not the typical capabilities. For example, you can, if you're the person that receives the funds and given the volatility of revenue, so this is how the financial institution ranks you. So you have the possibility of saying, I can extend my payment. If my payment is due on the 25th, I can do it in 15 days. So this gives you this flexibility, and or in terms of the guarantees or the collateral that you're asked, there's a lot more flexibility. Also in the use of wallets, I think this is really interesting. In the end, you're talking about empowerment, right? This same wallet reaches women clients, and what they do is they put these topics to the side, meaning the decision is not so much the woman's, but it's men's and women's, but the women are allowed to make the decisions to save or not save, or how to spend the money. And we're going to get to the part of data right now, more specifically. We know that all of this work of collecting data and to design products intelligently to serve women takes time and a lot of funds. How can we convince service providers, financial service provider, that gender diversity and inclusion are good for business cases? Well, I think that it's really easy. This is one of the easiest questions, in my opinion. This is 50% of the market. So to me, the topic of women represents half the population in Latin America. And of this half, 73% of the women, of the micro entrepreneurs, have a low coverage or are not covered by the financial system, the traditional financial services. And so it's right there. This is where the opportunity for growth lies, for financial services to create new portfolios. These are portfolios that present themselves with lots of opportunities. Now, how do you measure this? What is the real gap for Latin America? According to recent studies, it's $93 billion, and so there's a lot to be done. I insist that it is really evident to see what needs to be done in the region, generally speaking. It's just a matter of turning that way, of creating specific products, of having understanding that is a lot deeper of this segment in general, and of balancing out everything so that you can create portfolios that are a lot more equitable. And also, it's important to understand the implicit biases, generally speaking. Something important here is that although conditions are unequal in generally speaking for women, especially with access to financing, you need to add another filter. This is how we see it when speaking about gender diversity and inclusion. What happens with the subgroups of vulnerable communities? It is also very evident the lack of services that they have, but it is also important to see that they represent a significant part of the population. This is where the opportunity lies. And this is the segment, and it is a large segment. It's deep, and there's a lot to be done. Armando, for some investments, the business case is clear. The investment of impact with a gender lens ensures that they will be financial resources and will be destined to initiatives that will have a positive impact in women in their environment. What are the main trends that you see regarding the impact with a gender lens for the world and the region? Okay, there's a lot to be said regarding this, but let me choose the ones that I think that are the most relevant, both because of the main financial American groups as the European European ones. And generally speaking, in Latin America, there have been many positive things that are worth mentioning. I was commenting, for example, the topic of when this gap exists. Women, due to family reasons, stop working or put work in pause and they want to go back to work. So Santander has a plan that is called Reencounter, where there's this support to go back to the business place, to the after giving birth or after time off from work. There's Morgan Stanley. This is what they are doing too. They have created a tool that is called Holistic Equal Representation, and this provides you with a ranking of the equality in the investment vehicles, and these are handled by women. So there's two, private banking and asset management, among other things. Another important thing that has to be highlighted, this is something that we've all seen, it's a trend. And there are, or the money nowadays, the funding nowadays, typically has name and last name. And what do I mean by this? These are thematic investments where it's not just a matter of supporting small and medium enterprises. It's small and medium enterprises led by women. So all of these types of initiatives are also taking place in other places outside Latin America. For example, Standard Charter or things dealing with sustainable approaches or blue funds, green funds, among many other things that go hand in hand with development in topics related to gender. And lastly, from the UN, the Program for the Development for the United Nations, which highlights the relevance of the role played by women on topics of equality, given climate change and peace, world peace. So there are many, many things that are worth boasting, but there's still a ways to go. The gap is still there, and these are significant strides that have been made regarding these trends. We know that Latin America became a world leader in the emission of gender bonuses. What has been the trajectory of BID invest in these emissions, and what have been the objectives? Well, yes. Let me tell you a bit about BID invest. I think this is a trajectory that is very interesting, and it's important to see where it comes from and where it's at, given where it'll be in the future as well. It started in 2016 when they start talking about the use of funds. Eligibility for the use of funds, rather, when this is when they start to include the gender topic. And I think this is where they start to list the name and last name, so to speak. This requirement is included, and then it evolves gradually, and it integrates what I believe is necessary and a must in order to close the gap. These are topics related to technical assistance. And by this, I mean that it's not just a matter of loaning out money or doing investment as an intermediary, like a multilateral investment banking, but you also need to create the skills. This is a key aspect so that it can continue to grow at greater scale. So the topics of technical assistance begin to be included, the web tool, for example, which is a really cool tool. It gives you a glimpse of how the portfolio is doing, among many other things. And after that, it evolves. This effort evolves and becomes more and more sophisticated, and it moves on to gender bonds or gender with social bonds with a gender lens. And so it's a lot more specific. They have eligibility criteria, among other things, and this is where they are assessing topics of whether there is or not a strategy, a corporate strategy in place to avoid washing, and whether you need to strengthen or continue to develop it. Now, on the other hand, for example, our funding team also has requirements on what the thing that you're trying to do is to balance the representation of women and investment committees. And so there needs to be certain percentage of women in the investment committees because this conversation has to be opened. There needs to be a more inclusive conversation taking place, and one where it is nourished from the participation of men and women. Lastly, from the relevant thing in the last 2 or 3 years, we have the thematic bonds, as I was saying, but with the use of mixed funding, blended finance, which is the use of donations or concessional funds where you add incentives based on objectives. And so what are you doing? You're mobilizing capital, you're doing investment, you are leaving the infrastructure as such, and you're generating incentives in order to create certain metrics. There's the incentive to pay a lower rate, among many other things, and this is transferred straight to the targeted population. But today we continue very strongly emphasizing the need for investment with a gender lens. It is key. We see the opportunity, the critical mass exists. It is very evident as well, but along and hand in hand with all the issue of how we do it, which is an integrated offer where we have included topics of assessment, capital mobilization, among many other things as well. You have 2 more slides to share in your presentation, but I wanted to take the time to share with the audience that we are going to be able to take questions on camera. So if you want to ask a question to Armando, you can raise your hand with the Zoom option, and Daniel is going to give the floor. So please continue with your presentation.
Había mucho que platicar y poco tiempo,
I'm
pero
about
bueno.
to wrap up, and there was a lot to be said and little time. You have a few more minutes, but I just wanted to comment that there's a time for Q&A. Yeah, something to highlight about this. Clearly, Latin America is the leader. We are a big part of that story. Maybe this is something that we what we've done and the structures that we've created. What I would like to highlight here for the purpose of this conversation is social bonds with gender lens. There are 7 in which we have worked, and there are far more in which we would love to work. The opportunities continue to arise. Now, I think that more than just giving a number per se, it's that how do we do it? Giving a specific examples, I cannot name names, but a financial institution in El Salvador, a large institution sought us out for funding, and what they had was an offer that was maybe not as robust, but deep enough in terms of trying to grow the portfolio for women. Interestingly, the portfolio was very low when compared to the, in terms of percentages, to the real calculation. So what is it that we typically do? We come in and we go over the strategy. We provide recommendations on how to strengthen the strategy. We use our own arm of technical assistance in order to create or to strengthen the value proposal, to fine-tune the way in which it's measured. We seek to create a framework for a bonus, which is what we're doing, and we finally make this investment. So maybe this first, second, third investment, maybe you leave the infrastructure as it is, you move other investors, international or domestic investors, and you bring them on to the project. But in the end, what we're trying to do, what we're providing to this institution is the whole infrastructure so that they can then do it themselves with other investors, with other companies. But this is part of the offer that we have to provide as a comprehensive approach. It's like a package that sums up everything we do. It's not just investment, it goes beyond. And lastly, Mariana, I think that this is where we measure whether we are on track or not. The result is very significant. For the financial institution point of view, this is a contribution. This is the real impact. Close to 952,000 women have been benefited but because of all the initiatives that we have in place for investments, emissions and debts and other things, because this is the result, and it's important to highlight it. Thank you, Armando. Thank you for sharing with us. We have some questions in the chat box, but I would like to see if there's any participant with the hand raised that would like to ask the question on the microphone. If not, I'm going to ask you a question that Joanna asked. Mariana, yes, we do have someone who wants to ask a question. Can you give me the name, please? Edwin Alexander Gomez. Go ahead, Edwin, if you want to ask a question. Yes, a pleasure. Greetings from El Salvador. I would like to know, since you're talking about thematic bonds, what is the strategy that you have in place for fintech to include in the to be included in the capillarity of these funds? Because oftentimes generating the taxonomy for these frameworks for countries or banks turns out to be difficult. How can we make it easy for fintechs? Because I think this is where the mobilization part would come in. The mobilizing part would come in. I didn't hear the end of the question, says the speaker, but I understood the question, generally speaking. How I see it is that fintechs are an excellent vehicle to get to these target populations, to more women, generally speaking, and to more women in vulnerable situations. Now, what is it that happens, particularly in El Salvador? El Salvador has this definition, a definition that is perfectly clear regarding the SMEs and micro and SMEs and among many others. What we are doing with another financial institution is that we are complementing the definition with eligibility criteria that have been standardized regarding women, where you are really saying, okay, wonderful, what is your portfolio? Is it SMEs, micro entrepreneurs? Is it housing, or is it the enhancement of housing, among many other aspects? So you create a framework of sorts, and it's a framework that goes hand in hand with the corporate strategy that the financial intermediary has. And this is why it's so important for this strategy to be in place and to not have someone else bring it to you, because it goes hand in hand with what you're seeking to achieve. What we want is to put it in place and to frame it so that we can then make these investments in a way that is systematic or specific and measurable as well. I think this is the core aspect of it all, that it can be measured and that you are able to see the effort on the fintech side and on the non-fintech side. This applies to financial intermediaries in general, how to approach this segment. Thank you, Armando. We have another question from Aníbal Montoya. Go ahead, Aníbal. Yes, good morning. It's a pleasure to greet you all. Mr. Armando, it's a pleasure to see you over here, and it's wonderful to see all of my friends. We are a financial society located in Central America that a few years ago participated in an IDB Invest program. And based on this support that we received, we addressed, or we catered to close to 7 to 10,000 women with microloans in the region through 7 micro finance institutions, and we implemented 4 products that were innovative. This means that this support, this institutional support that we also received, empowered us to cater to the sector, which was especially for women. It had innovative services for women. My question is related to your presentation, because in it I see that there is interest to cater to microfinances in the region. However, our approach is to add another operation with the IDB has not been possible, because we have been told that the IDB is looking for other means, other segments, and where we are right now, I think, is where we are able to truly make an impact, not just for subsistence of the women, but also for value added and for employment generation as well. I would like to know if the IDB has thought about retaking these approach, because ASICSA, as an entity, a second tier entity in the region, would be very interested in retaking this possibility and having funds available, as we did with the IDB Invest in a very successful way, because additionally to having an impact in the market, we were able to serve women. We included institutions that had no funding, and these were funds that we returned already. And the question is based on whether there is a possibility of having access to funds. If so, we are very interested in being a part of this. Thank you. And I apologize for taking so long. No, Aníbal, thank you so much for the question. It's a pleasure. And I think it's perfectly clear. We are working not just in El Salvador, but also in general in all of the region with a gender approach. This is part of our cross-cutting agenda. And this is why we are participating in these types of forums, so that you all know what we're doing, so that you can all feel the effort and the interest that exists to drive forward the topic of gender equality, and also under the umbrella of financial inclusion, among many other things. I am not aware of the specifics of your institution, but I will gladly talk it over with you. I can even tell you that in El Salvador, we are working with other financial institutions and with our clients, and we have done so for many, many years. So interest, we do have interest in doing so. I would like to invite you to, additionally to having these conversations, sometimes there are other factors as well. At the end of the day, if it's a risk performance issue, or maybe it's a capability aspect, among many other things. But yeah, of course there is interest, and yes, of course, there is this interest or this drive to really develop these types of markets, to develop these types of skills in all kinds of financial institutions. Thank you, Armando. We have a question which will be hard to answer because of time, but Evelyn, can you please ask your question quickly? Yes, hello, very quickly, thank you. Greetings from Bolivia. From Santa Cruz. We are very new. We have been around for 2 years, but we do have experience with entrepreneurs, people that sell in the marketplace. I'm sure that this is something that happens in other countries, as Armando mentioned, but we have pivoted. We are a startup within fintech, and we have a product, and we are soon to launch it to support women, because we know that there are many, many women with this experience. We digitalize them so that they could have as salespersons, they could have their history of sales. And they used to keep it in a notebook, but we've digitized this information for them. And so with this information, we are able to give them other services as well. These segments that we have been focusing on are not sectors reached by traditional banking services. It's a fact. And so we are ready to support or to provide certain products for this segment in particular. These are entrepreneur women that we know are not being included, so that we can provide them with the digitization of their information. So my question is whether we could look at other markets that have this same need. If so, then if you have the experience and there are others who are similar to Bolivia, then we would like to learn about them, so that we can approach this information and give a different angle to Bolivia. Yes, thank you. What you're doing is extremely interesting. In fact, the IDB group is made up by 3 institutions. IDB Invest, which is the private side. This is us. There's also the IDB Lab, which I would recommend that you approach, because they are a different type of approach. They focus more on startups. It goes very hand in hand with what you're mentioning in topics that are a lot more innovative, and there's the public IDB. So I would tell you that this is a good way to go to maximize the effort that you're doing. These are the type of investments that this team looks at specifically. So this is a good way to go. And definitely from there, both we and us can advise you on what's happening. I don't have a lot of time to explain, but we are also seeing other types of things happening in other countries to complement that work that you're doing. At the end of the day, what we're looking for is to help to create a private sector in Latin America and the Caribbean that will be more inclusive with greater equality and where women have the same opportunities than men do to benefit and to profit from the financial growth. This, said in other words, is to expand the work that you as intermediaries are doing so that you can achieve this balance in order to reach this balance and truly close the gap.
Muchísimas gracias, Armando. Tenemos un montón de
Thank you
preguntas.
very much, Armando. We have a lot of questions in the chat box, which we will not be able to answer right now because of time limits. But we also have another panel with Maria Jose on financial education and data because of the questions that are in the chat box. We also have a panel on impact investment and Valeria on the successful products. And some people are answering as well in the chat box, and I invite you to participate in panels tomorrow. We will continue answering your questions throughout these 2 days. So thank you, Armando, for your participation, for the vision of IDB Invest. I invite you to continue participating in this forum. Thank you very much, Armando. On the contrary, I thank you for listening to me and the hosts for your invitation. Thank you, Armando. And with all of this information that Armando left us, we are going to invite you to go to the 3 different rooms. You are going to be able to choose the rooms according to your interests. Daniel is going to be allowing us into the rooms. You will be able to choose what room you want to go to. We have room 1 where we will be discussing how to face climate change and guarantee food security for women. If we go to the next slide, these are the people in that room. As moderator, Lourdes Valeriano, president of Red Micro. We were going to have Guillermina Martin, but she will not be able to attend. So we are going to have Andrea Salas, who is going to be participating instead of Guillermina, also from the UNDP for Latin America and the Caribbean. We are going to have Adela Sagastume, who is the manager of social performance and corporate affairs of Genesis Empresarial, and Cecilia Rocato, regional advisor of the World Food Program. Room 2, promoting access to a sound financial health for women. The moderator is Reynold Walter, representative of ReadyMIF. We are going to have Diana Mejia, senior specialist on financial inclusion of CAF, and Marisol Fernandez, global services director for Red Mujer. And in room 3, Rita Cassisi, the program advisor senior for young women, will be moderating. We are going to have the participation of Julius Jansura, Program Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, Global Financial Integrity. Ryan Newton, Carmen Paola Cepeda, Regional Project Director for UN Migration. Laura Trueba, Director for LAC of Consumer Centrics, and Angela Maria Panqueva, Director for Equity and Inclusion, Banca Mia, Colombia. In room number 3, we are going to have translation into English for those of you who want to listen to the English version. You don't have to leave this room. It is going to be in the same room as the plenary session, but you have to leave if you are in room 2 and room 1. We are going to be speaking about food security and financial health. You will have to choose room 1 or room 2. Room 3 stays here. Pablo, let us know when you're ready. Room 3 stays here. Migration and remittances. Room 2, financial health, and room 1, climate change and food security. Whenever you say, Daniel. Hello, and thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Mariana. Greetings to all of you. We would like to welcome you to this space and this panel, creating a bridge between financial services and women. I am going to be introducing the panelists who will be with us today. Julia Jansura, Director of the Program for Latin America and Caribbean of Global Financial Integrity. Welcome, Julia. Thank you very much. We continue with Ryan Newton, CEO and founder of the FinTech Paisa. Welcome, Ryan. Hi, good morning. Then we continue with Angela Pantema, Director on Equity and Inclusion, Banca Mia. Welcome, Angela. Good morning to all. It's a great pleasure to be here. And Laura Trueba, Regional Director for LAC Consumer Centrics. Welcome, Laura. Good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here. I have been told that there's a change. We are going to have from the regional IOM office, Elizabeth Breño. Thank you. I'm here. So, Mariana has given us a lot of indications. We know that this is a panel whose purpose is to learn about this topic. We have certain guiding questions. And after the round of guiding questions to the panelists, we will be able to receive questions from the audience. So let's just remember the learning objective. We are going to be focusing on learning how migrant women face barriers to access financial services due to the lack of documents, lack of knowledge of financial systems in the new country. And this makes it difficult for them to have comprehensive growth. We are going to be presenting financial models based on migrant women and non-financial services to strengthen their skills. So we are very curious to learn about that. And let's start with a round of questions. And the first question is for Elizabeth from IOM. And the question is, what is the situation of migrant women in terms of access to financial services? And what programs or services does IOM offer in synergy with other stakeholders to support migrant women? First of all, I apologize on behalf of Paola Cepada. She was sent to a field mission. It was an emergency, so I have been delegated for this important panel. Regarding the first question, the situation of migrant women and the access to financial services, let me tell you that according to different studies that IOM has conducted, some and most of them in coordination with central banks, for example, in the case of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and the Dominican Republic, we have identified certain gender gaps in terms of remittances. For example, remittances received in Latin America and the Caribbean have increased the past years at a macroeconomic level. But it is very difficult to obtain information on the percentage of remittances sent by women and what is the impact on the original communities from the point of view of savings and investment. So here we see the first important gap. Another element is how remittances are transformed into savings and investment, integrating the facilities of new technologies, using communication and information technologies or other electronic tools. What we identify is that women have greater difficulties to make use of these new technologies linked to the financial services. Another element that we have been identifying is that households that receive remittances really don't know what is the cost of sending the remittance, the time and human effort invested in each dollar sent as a remittance. If there is incomplete information in this analysis between the sender and the receiver, this also implies that they don't know what type of financial services are available to facilitate this money transfer. So they really don't know what's needed to speed up transactions and also how to use these remittances for savings and investment. What have we found in surveys? More than 30% of migrants residing abroad have the intention to save in a bank in their country of origin because they want to build a family business, they want to buy a house or make other payments. The results say that the intention to save is greater when the migrant has a regular status because they want to accelerate the sending of remittances. And this is associated with their roots. It's different when an individual has permanent residence in the destination country. It's very important to highlight that when women send remittances, they want to pay basic services, consumption, and health, compared to men who earn more and send more money, but with greater frequency for different types of payments. Another element we have identified is that there's more probability that in the original country, they receive remittances when it's a woman, but they have 30% more possibilities that remittances will stop if there's a stop in the relationship with the sender due to any family situation. Another key element is how we can suggest public policy that offer alternatives for investment to migrants that have to do with social security, how to promote financial incentives for migrants living abroad, whether for loans, savings. So I think that this is a key message that we need to highlight in this context. And we invite you next week that we are going to publish the new research on remittances for Hondurans in the US. It will be published next week. It will be presented in the social networks and the page of IOM Honduras. The second question, programs and services that IOM offers. This depends on the context. For example, we speak about an emergency situation, we provide multi-purpose money cards. It has happened mostly with population in transit. And there are also support programs, whether we provide scholarships, employment campaigns, a seed fund for returned migrants, or in other cases, seed fund for migrant population that go to a destination community. So the options vary in this area. And we also have regional and sub-regional products for migrant women having synergies with the private sector, including banking and government institutions. And we also have specific actions with local communities for sustainable reintegration. In addition, within the framework of the regional project with ADA Luxembourg, we have support to these women through financial education and also actions that have to do with violence prevention. Finally, an important issue here is the generation of evidence. As we said at the beginning, we are moving forward with analysis, evidence, working with migrants abroad, but also coordinating with the consulates abroad. So this dynamic is very interesting because this type of analysis cannot be with only one stakeholder. On the contrary, the more stakeholders participate in this type of evidence generation, the better quality we will have, and we can identify more of the gender gaps that we have, and we will be able to respond to the different needs. I close with the last message. We have a planning guide for migrant women on how to promote the autonomy of migrant women. We have already mapped 6 key actions. One, support in the regularization of migration data, social security and support networks, and creation of soft skills, promotion of soft skills, seed funds with sustainability. If those migrant people have a business, we will support them with value chains. And finally, financial education, remittances, savings, and investments. These are the key factors that we have identified and mapped in this regional project. I am open to any questions. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. A very interesting presentation, a wealth of information. It's so great what you are doing and offering to migrants. Let's go to the second question for Julia. Julia, what is the impact of programs and initiatives implemented by Global Financial Integrity with migrant women in terms of remittances, mobile money, and the development of countries in Central America and the Caribbean? Good morning. Thank you for your question. I would like to use this space to tell you a little bit about our approach at Global Financial Integrity in terms of remittances and gender, and also to tell you about a specific initiative that we launched a month ago that has to do with digitalization of remittances. First of all, I would like to say that we promote the use of data, quantitative data, to understand the issues of women who send or receive remittances. I think that possibly all of us are familiar with this topic, but among the general public, the coverage in the media, conversations among people, public policy, we see an absence of data, and this is of concern to us. Specifically, there are certain stereotypes that I believe affect our work, and when we see the data, they actually do not support these stereotypes. The first one is that women who receive remittances do not work, are not working. When we take a look at the data, we see that a lot of women who receive remittances do work, perhaps not full time, perhaps not formal work, but they are indeed working. So we need to use data to better understand these populations, and that's key. Another thing that we see is that women are the only ones who receive remittances. No, the data clearly show, and like Licenciada Membreño said, more women are sending remittances. So it is important to integrate this aspect in the way that we understand remittances and gender. Another stereotype that we see is that the remittances are spent. the entire remittances are spent in consumption. I have heard it 1,000 times, but no, when we take a look at quantitative data of people who receive remittances, women who receive remittances, we see that they spend part of the remittance. That's okay. That's what the remittance is for, in housing, food, health, education. But we also find that many people who receive remittances and many women who receive remittances are saving the remittances, perhaps not formally, but yes, they are saving part of the remittances. So we see here the importance of using specific data to understand these populations and avoid believing stereotypes about women and remittances. At GFI, we promote an anti-money laundering policy that is inclusive for people who send and receive remittances, and mostly for women. We are specialists in AML issues. This is one of the topics that we work on the most in the organization. However, we believe that these policies were built to keep bad people out of the financial system. These policies were not designed to exclude poor people. That's not the intention. And when we use it that way, that's incorrect. So we really promote thinking about gender issues, remittances, inclusion, whenever AML measures are designed and implemented. And third, I wanted to share with you a new initiative in which we are participating at Global Financial Integrity in partnership with an organization that is called PCI, Partnership for Central America. There we are working with a group of financial institutions in Northern Central America and a group of remittance companies to promote digital remittances, digital deposits, remittances that are received digitally in the countries of Northern Central America. With these remittance companies and financial institutions, we have the commitment to increase digital remittances deposited in accounts by 20% in 5 years. With the initial group where we launched the initiative, this is going to be digitalizing almost $40 million in remittances in 5 years. So the invitation is open to partners because we are trying to make this initiative grow. We believe that digital remittances have great benefits for financial inclusion and for women. So I am open for any questions or concerns, and thank you for this space. Excellent, Julia. It is very interesting to hear about the new initiative, and surely we are going to discuss this topic in depth. Let's continue with the third question for Laura. Yes, Laura is here. What types of strategies can be developed to overcome the barriers and close gaps in financial access among migrant women? Thank you very much for this space. When answering this question, I would like to focus on women who receive international remittances and share some findings in the recent study we had with USAID in Guatemala. We conducted a market research among women who were not served, and it revealed essential things for digital financial services. The first thing that we did is that we detected the segments that were feasible for digital financial services, which is a little bit linked to the other topics we discussed. Women who received international remittances. In Guatemala, there are more than 4 million individuals receiving remittances, mostly women. And then women who sent national remittances and women who received national remittances. There are more than 500,000 women who receive national remittances in Guatemala. And the selection of this was based on segments and on criteria according to the potential of these three segments that we identified, the potential of three impacts. We selected them according to that. First, that they have irregular income from remittances. Second, their willingness to adopt a digital financial solution. They have access to internet, access to a smartphone or a mobile phone. And third one is that they have the possibility of scaling up, that they can be implemented at mass scale. And this is what we chose. The study gave us a result, some important aspects in terms of digital technology. They were very receptive. For example, despite the limited use of financial services among this segment, there is awareness and openness to their use because they recognize that they receive the money and there is the aspect of security. An issue that we believe is important is that they can take advantage of financial services with certain openness and assistance, and they need to take account the need for digital literacy and financial education, especially for population segments above 35 years old. And something very important was that we found that remittances in Guatemala are received over the counter, which means that these women go to the bank actually to receive the remittances, but they don't have a savings account or any other services. That's why they have direct contact with the financial institutions, which gives them a great opportunity to capture this fund.
Algo muy importante,
Another
interesante,
important thing and interesting thing as part of this project is that we are carrying out a pilot plan with a digital wallet in order to serve domestic workers in the Guatemala City. Most of them have migrated from the rural areas in the country. So these, as I was saying, there are three segments. So the house cleaning ladies, the domestic employees would be the ones who send funds domestically to their hometowns in Guatemala, to the rural areas. So the project is focused on digitalizing the wages that their employees pay them and the transfers that they make on to the relatives in their hometowns. There are more than 256,000 domestic workers in Guatemala that regularly send money to their families. Imagine the triangulation, because we are speaking that they receive payment from their employer, they receive their wages, and they have it in an account or in their wallet, because we are speaking with a wallet as a pilot project, and then it goes out to their hometown. So it's like a triangle. This could presuppose up to 1 million beneficiaries, and therefore working with this segment represents a true impact potential for the population that is not being served in Guatemala, especially women. This pilot project is being tested right now, and it has a series of parts: marketing messages, integration of education, financial education into the service, as well as digital information, and also characteristics of the interface design of this wallet, and also incentives, because this triangulation it has to happen and it needs to grow. And so we are very excited to be able to share the results of this pilot project once we have grown and we are closer to the ending date. But another important thing, additionally from the research that we did and the results that we obtained from those segments and the potential to impact the women massively, especially the women that have been marginalized or are not being served, we want to highlight that we have not just focused on this qualitative market research that we've done. We've also done secondary research and we've investigated the key stakeholders in the sector. But we have also researched or have an approach on how to see the whole financial ecosystem, in the sense that we look at the financial infrastructure and the TICs, for example, in Guatemala, this has grown significantly, but it needs to be addressed even more, especially in the rural areas. Another very important thing that we've detected in the Guatemala case is the lack of ID documents by almost 1/3 of the population. And this is a great challenge for us to reach this segment with financial services. Another thing that we considered as part of this ecosystem, let's call it financial ecosystem, is that we need for more solid coordination between the public and the private sector in order to carry out activities regarding the financial and digital services, as well as to foster digital innovative solutions for those who are not served or those who are underserved, based on the research that we or based on the results that we've obtained from this research. Another important thing that needs exploring in the ecosystem is that although the information on the supply are available and some are disaggregated geographically, it is key to disaggregate them by gender, adding other services additionally to loans so that we can measure in time how these groups are served, and especially with digital channels. It is important to create a dashboard that will create performance, financial performance sector to give us a glimpse of the access and the financial use of these products. And we hope that the results of this program will contribute to give the interested parties in the Guatemalan sector and in the region as well a greater understanding of what is needed to carry out to bring out services to this important segment in the population and have them join the formal financial sector, and more importantly, to have them become a business case and to have to work with these specific segments that we've identified in this project with with USAID. Thank you very much. I think this is a pilot project that awakens our curiosity. We are expecting to see the results, Laura. I think that we'll have to meet again so that we can go into the details of your research. I think there are some questions about this, so we'll address them later on. We will continue with Angela. Hello, Angela. What are the main barriers faced by migrant women when they try to access financial services in a new country? And which financial initiatives and non-financial initiatives does Bancamia offer so that they can be better integrated economically and socially? Thank you very much for this time. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you once again. I think that the first thing that I can reply to this question is that all the barriers that Armando mentioned are doubled to the end power because migrant women are far more vulnerable in the national territory. When a migrant woman reaches a new territory, you need to add another context, and it's that in many cases, this woman might arrive in having experienced violence or sexual abuse or hungry and evidently in a being displaced, and this makes them far more vulnerable. And this is why I would like to start with this awareness. We need to understand that a migrant woman, when she arrives in a territory, she requires all of this analysis, and not just of how many arrive, but also how. How did they arrive, and what is that moment when they arrive in the territory, and what are the conditions in which they arrive, often with several children tagging along under age, and they require and demand to be cared for. But another important thing is that migrant women arrive, why is it that they arrive in this territory and not in another one? And Banca Mia is an entity specializes in microfinance in Colombia, and we have been working even before the pandemic in understanding the reality of migrant women, of migrant persons that arrive in our territory. And I will put on the hat of banker, of banquet, because the main difficulty or the first barrier with which these persons arrive to the territories is the lack of paperwork, documents that give them an irregular status in the country, but also the diversity of documents also. Migrant women arrive in the territories oftentimes with an expired passport, with work permits that are not allowed or are not valid. They are unidentified, and they come with permits in process or permits to remain in the country in process. And so, and this is when we are speaking about a financial service, this is an obstacle, a significant hurdle, because the financial system is a regulated system. It's a system that requires this status of regular citizenship in a country. And this is why going to an experience in this institution is very important, because we from as I insist, since the work that we've been doing since 2019, we started carrying out pilot projects in which we carry out interventions with the entities that regulate the financial topic in Colombia. And we have worked with migration as well to figure out how these documents that, for example, in Colombia, were called a PPT, became documents that became regular in the financial system, and they became part of the standards in the financial system. And we were breaking barriers, or yes, breaking barriers of the number of these documents. We need to register the operations. We have to register the identities of these operations. And we realized that even in that, we needed to have an impact in public policy regarding migration, so that we as as reporting entity could report, because the system demands us to do so. So the first thing had to do with identity, with diversity, or the diversity of documents rather, and how these how this new reality that requires new identities, that requires new ways of identifying ourselves in a new country, are made possible when participating or interacting with the financial institutions. The second thing is what Armando was saying. I think that we as a sector, as the financial sector, we realize that if there's a potential to include migrants financially into the system, then this potential to include them it depends on productivity, and productivity is what allows them to remain in the territory that they arrive. In the case of Banca Mia, we know that women arrive in the territory when they stay in places where there's a capacity for children to enroll in school. So it's not a minor topic. This is something when they can be working anywhere, but if the school is open in a different area, they choose to migrate to that place so that children can get an education and they can be cared for while they work. And so we see that on the side of women and of migrants in general, there's this absence of information that make it viable to carry out risk assessment. And this data is evidently limited, first of all, by the time that they remain in the country, and secondly, by the absence of documents that allow them to analyze them. In the case of Banca Mia, for us to deliver or for us to carry out a credit assessment for migrants, we are requesting as a minimum a year of residence in the country. And because of this, there is a bit, the risk policies are a bit more strict. We have experts who are accompanying us in the process, and these people have very low risk. And additionally to the conditions that Armando explained with informality and volatility. Thirdly, I think that there's a limited sense of ownership, or they are not rooted in the place, because we have seen the experience that those who migrate do so temporarily because, and precisely this leads them to be unaware of the financial institutions that can provide them with financial services in a formal or a regulated way. This is why in the case of Banca Mia, it is so important to have this bank in which the bank officer knows the bank and they know the opportunity, and I would even dare to say that they can go and greet the person that is coming to the territory and say, come, let me offer you my services. I am a bank. I can help you. What business idea do you have? Because people are unaware of the financial situation of the territory that they arrive in. And lastly, but not less important is the lack of integration to that they can be part of a supply chain or a business chain. Part of the migrants' reality is that they need to be linked to have the possibility and to have the potential of having their business grow so that they can have more and better opportunities. And this is where the person truly decides to remain longer in the country and not to think of a momentary migration once they have acquired financial obligations. Another thing that might not be related to finances, but maybe it does, is that women in general, not just migrants, but it's very visible with migrant women, is that they are concerned about the care of others. They are concerned about the stability of their mom that they left behind in Venezuela, or of the sick grandpa who's in the hospital, and of the care of their children here, that they experience no harm, that young girls are not getting pregnant and other things, and that they can have access to education. And so this is something that we have seen in them, the need for them to have well-being emotionally and physically. So with this background, I would conclude by saying that since 2020, we have a value supply that has been growing and becoming more robust for migrants in Colombia. And this is something that we've developed with the support of IFC since 2021. And we wanted to generate a value service through Venezuelans' objectives, because both the migrant women as well as Venezuelans in general are not monolithical. They are people who come twice or more than once. There are people who come back. There are people who have a greater possibility of identifying themselves. They have larger business, more robust business with a greater degree of development. And what we did is we tailored this service that Banca Mia has with 15 years experience in the microfinance industry, and we provided this to migrants. We currently have 78 offices that provide this value service, and it's not opened in all the offices in the country, because it requires specific conditions. But we have found that we had to leverage and reach certain agreements with the territorial entities in order to regulate this and to address the irregular condition of migrants. And we have also been able to obtain certain collaterals for the loans, such as the collateral that the bank leverages with USAID in order to ensure the portfolio and the compliance of the obligations, because you understand that non-compliance or the lack of payment because of the nature of the population is high. So we provide saving services, traditional saving services, as any other bank, such as loans for work capital, for investment, and also during the pandemic,
nosotros
Sí.
potencializamos o le dimos un valor a esto.
we maximized, or we gave an additional value to a program that we have in alliance with USAID in order to strengthen partners and entrepreneurs, especially for migrant persons. So the numbers that we currently have, and I want to share information with you so that I don't go into too much detail, but today we have an accrued amount of 8,300 Venezuelan clients served in Banca Mía, and out of them, 75% are women. Out of the 4,000 women, more or less, have been served. And what's most important, and what gives me the most pleasure to share with you, is that this service is something that is growing. This year, we have experienced a growth of almost 18% in the number of clients that we have served. And this is a result basically of new services that we have made available for migrants. For example, insurance. Insurance used to be a service that was offered exclusively to persons for nationals in the country, but today, in an alliance that we have with a company, we are providing services, insurance, because it provides specific needs for services and for well-being, especially with breastfeeding for mothers during the 4 months in which these are contemplated in the Colombian law. For the mother who is breastfeeding, have the possibility not just to care for their child, but also to protect her status through this insurance so that she can comply with the financial obligations. And so I think that this is a topic that needs to be explored further. And evidently, like we have done in Banca Mía, we can provide them our value service, and we can approach them and serve their needs with these changing environments, for example, with digitization. Thank you, Angela. It's really very interesting, the glimpse that you gave us in the context, the relation with the possibility of approaching the individuals who turn to a bank for services. And now let's go to the final question to Ryan. According to the Paisa experience, which characteristics should the digital financial models have in order to meet the needs and the circumstances that are specific to migrant women? Thank you, Rita, and thank you all for this invitation. Just to give you a bit of context, in Mexico, where I am living and where Paisa is located, more than 60 billion remittances received in Mexico are charged cash, are collected cash, in cash. And of those who receive the money, those who are collecting the cash, more than 70% are women, and they are less accessible to banking service than the people in Mexico, although there's a big flow of money. And traditional agencies that pay remittances, like SMEs and the small businesses that pay remittances, they too have less liquidity and they have less access to financial services. And it's interesting that we work with agencies and they are led mostly by women. The owners of these agencies are women. And so this is part of the ecosystem that is very interesting. And in spite of all the initiatives to digitize and to make remittances be part of the banking system, the percentage cashed is still 85% and above, and continues to be this for several years now because there are several barriers and hurdles that remain in the market. The products are there. We know that we've created them, we've designed them. There are many, many fintechs, but cash continues to be king. And this is when in 2021, Paisa decides to drive forward financial inclusion through remittances once they have been cashed in Mexico. We're starting in Mexico, but we have plans with other countries, but we don't send the money. How can remittances drive this financial inclusion forward? We are starting with loans based on the history of remittances, and we are planning on savings and insurance, all of them with remittances as funding and as the starting point for offering this service. And so Paisa, we have more than 80% of clients that are women and agents, as I said before, which account to 50%. And specifically to Rita's question, I would say three things. Number one, it needs to have the financial models in order to better reach the women, and this is in the experience for those who receive the money, especially those who have the connection with the person sending the money. So first of all, access. As I said, the product is there. We know that savings product, loans, there are there's many offers out there, but for us in Paisa, access is key. How does the money reach the receiver? How do we distribute it? So we need to see where and how, or rather when the products are being offered. Remittances are a key moment because it's a recurring flow. We know that it arrives every week, every 2 weeks, or every month, and this is the right moment to offer these services. Laura mentioned it, the windows, the tellers in the bank is the key moment for us to offer these services to them. And also, in the topic of access, which user cases are we offering? We need to have user cases that are relevant, meaning savings might not, mortgages. We talk about houses, but mortgages are not necessarily for everyone. This is a financial product that are very significant, maybe to build or to improve a home, make renovations in the home, because we do know that they usually use the money to build one room at a time. And so we need to adapt our services according to the needs. So as part of access, we also need to look at type of technology. In Paisa, we use technology based on WhatsApp. It has APIs and databases that are very robust in the background, but everything's done through WhatsApp chats because this is technology that is already in use. Why reinvent the wheel? Why try to create apps that have passwords that are complicated emails? Why are we making it more complicated, creating more barriers? Why not build instead on technology that is already in use and that they already have access to? So that has to do with access. Second, requirements. Which requirements do most of our clients have? Well, which IDs do they have? Documents where they can prove, and mostly these documents are not made out to the women, but rather to the husband or an uncle or someone else. We've seen many cases like this, and so we need to be able to test it with the address. We cannot use those documents as proof of where they live. And also, like Julia mentioned, we need to determine that there is revenue. We know that women have lots of revenue. We've seen it in our clients. Oftentimes, it's not formal revenue, so it's more difficult to prove it for loans, for example. So remittances for us becomes revenue. And this can be proven, and this is a formal income that they receive because they have receipts, and these receipts are constant. So we can use alternative data. This is key, and also to consider data that might not be what's traditionally used. So the first thing is access, the second thing is requirement, and the third thing is communication and UX, the user experience, in order to reduce emotional distance. In Mexico, for example, there's no topic of lack of banks. There's lots of banks and lots of financial institutions everywhere, but people don't want to turn to them. They've had terrible experiences with them. It's an experience of standing in long lines, paperwork, complications. There's emotional distance that is significant. It can be approached with financial education, but it has to go beyond. You need to create an experience as well that is a lot more friendly and a lot more accessible, with communication with words that make sense, that are easily understood, with flows that make sense, that you can go out and ask for help, that you can press a button and not be afraid that you're gonna lose or waste all your money. Things that make sense and that allow you to know where you are in a specific flow. this communication and this experience is key, especially in the experience to include women that goes very closely linked to requirements once you are there, and also access as the other two things. I'll stop there because I know we have very limited time, and maybe there are questions. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Yes, we do have very little time, but the topic was very interesting. A concept that privileges in communication so that we can allow women to approach the banking and financial system more. We have 7 minutes for Q&A. There's lots of questions everywhere, so we have 7 minutes to ask questions. I'll start at the end then. I am reading here, Flor de Maria is asking, what percentage is being loaned given a record in remittances? Who would like to answer this? Ryan, perhaps? Yes, sure. We have two products, one for remittance receivers, so we give them microloans for 30 days based on their remittance history. And in the percentage that we give is more or less 25 to 30% of what they can prove they receive every month. It starts lower, and once a history is created, we increase the amount and we encourage it with this Bureau of Remittances that we are creating with our technology, and also with their history of repayment. So we award them and we give them larger amounts. We also provide for the agencies that pay remittances, which is everyone that is experiencing lack of funds, and they're very far away from banks and remote areas. And if they don't have services, it can affect their business. So we offer them credit lines, and this is for 7 days or 9 days, and they pay what they use, and it's like a revolving fund that helps them with paying and allows them to have liquidity. Thank you, Ryan. There's a question from Ciencia Moises. Do you have information on migrant financial inclusion for migrants that go back to their place of origin in Central America? Could you share information on this? Maybe Elizabeth, or would you like to answer? Elizabeth from OIT? OIM? Well, as I said, we have research, but you can find them in each one of the offices. Let's say you're interested in Mexico, you can turn to the office in Mexico, and we don't have a regional indicator, nor do we have consolidated information by region for the same reason, because to a certain degree, each country has moved forward at a different pace, or at a different pace, yes, depending on their own dynamics as a country. However, we could make an effort to look for key references that might be explored, and we can send this information to the organizers of the event so that this can be included in the list of resources that they will share 2 days later, I think they said. They are going to share the presentations and reference material. So I'll look into this so that I can expand on this information regarding migrants and remittances.
Very well, Elizabeth. There's another question. How do receivers of remittances can get their funds in the rural areas and in informal markets? Who would like to answer that? I'm not working on remittances at this time. So I think that this question is for anyone doing remittances. May I? I can try to answer that, and then the others could contribute to that. I think that it's a great question, and it's also a challenge, because we see great benefits in digital remittances. However, the question has to do with why should I have a digital remittance if I cannot use digital money in my community? So we need to promote the adoption of digital remittances at the same time that we promote digitalization processes in general in the different communities. It's going to take time. It's not going to be perfect. It is a great challenge for our communities, mostly for rural communities. I think that for urban communities, we see more adoption with through credit cards, debit cards, digital wallets. I don't see this too such a difficult endeavor in urban communities, but in rural communities, digital remittances will not be able to advance quickly if there are no digital payment methods that exist in the same community. May I? I just want to add something. I agree. Also, the lack of cash in and cash out. It's not only to receive it, but how do you use it? And vice versa. It's logical. Imagine cash if you cannot cash it. We see that a lot. So we are trying to make those branches as points of payment so that we can have digital remittances. It's difficult. It's a long process, and that's why most people use cash. All right. In the region, Valdivia says, there is effective communications with the legislative branch to establish policies for migrant women, or is there still a long way to go? We have only 50 seconds, 45 seconds to answer. Otherwise, we'll stop there thinking about that answer and come back to the plenary session so that we can continue sharing what we discussed in the rooms. Okay, excellent. You don't have to do anything. You can stay here. Thank you to Ryan, Julia, Elizabeth. Coming back to the main session, I think this has been very productive session. All the learning in each of the rooms. We are going to ask our moderators to give us a brief summary of what you have discussed. Let's start with room number 1. Lourdes, are you with us in this main plenary session? Well, a brief summary of what we discussed with our 3 panelists, mostly in terms of climate change and women's inclusion in the rural areas, we were able to see that there's a broad gap in terms of food security between men and women. We know that in cases of climate disasters, women are affected the most. And also women are those who provide food security to their families. Despite of that, women are unaware of what they are providing to their family and to the society in terms of food and income generation. There are a lot of initiatives, we know that. There are several institutions like Genesis Empresarial who have implemented products, are providing training, and also innovative tools that allow greater reach for rural women. And they have also overcome the gaps in the area of language, mostly in Guatemala, where we know that there's a great variety of languages, dialects in this country. And the issue is to promote these initiatives, to develop products that adapt to women's needs, make women know about their climate rights, make them aware of their contribution, and also promote comprehensive initiatives for financial products, education, and facilitation of access to these services, mostly in the rural area. Thank you very much, Lourdes. Let's invite the moderator of room 2 on financial health. Have we lost Andrea? Lost the moderator? Yes, let's just verify that she's in the plenary session. Mariana, can we go to the other room? Yes, we can go to room number 3 while we wait for Mr. Reynolds. And perhaps our panelists in room 2 could think about something they could share. I give the floor to Rita now. Hi, Mariana. Yes, many elements have been useful in this space. In panel 3, at IOM, we see that despite the fact that banks work on that, we still have great difficulties to access data. So it's difficult to have information that allows us to measure the impact of information technologies and digitalization. They also highlighted that migrants really don't know the costs of sending remittances, which means a lower ability to elect or select their financial services. They are focusing on developing options to transform remittances into savings and investments. At Global Financial Integrity, they said that there is a need to use data and digital information to overcome the stereotypes. We need to improve access to data that will allow us to improve analysis and generate products and services. There are also several examples of actions that are important to respond to migrants, like digital access to e-wallets among entities that provide remittances. We have the possibility of having digital remittances and also the possibility to triangulate remittances and payments with the individual that wants to send help to their country of origin. So there are some efforts on e-wallets, the digitalization of wages, and there's a lot of attention being paid to interventions with regulators. Banks are making efforts so that they can pay attention to the diversity of documents. And there's also the need among banks to take a look at the context and come closer to people, get closer to the communities, so that there's a big effort in terms of communication, so that access to financial products can be something friendly, understandable, and can be accessible to all. We also have very interesting technologies among fintech, existing technologies like WhatsApp, which is more friendly to be able to make bank transfers and also access strategic information. This is in general terms. Thank you, Rita, for sharing with us what you did in room 3. We have Mr. Reynolds already.
Para que entonces nos haga un resumen de lo conversado en la sala.
Well,
No le escuchamos.
please give us a summary. We cannot hear you. You're muted.
A ver. No le escuchamos, don Reynolds.
We cannot hear you.
¿Ahora sí? Sí, correcto. Adelante.
Sí, muchas gracias. Buenos días a todos.
Thank you and good morning all.
Al formato que nos dieron,
Based on the
un poquito al
framework you gave us at the beginning, we
empezamos directamente con las
didn't start with the questions, Mariana.
5 minutitos para que
We gave 5 minutes so that
Diana como Marisol
both Diana and Marisol could
5 minutos cada quien
tell us for 5 minutes
lo que hacían
what they do at ProMujer and IDECAF in the area of financial health.
temas que íbamos a abordar. Entonces,
And so that put us at ease so that we wouldn't start with a question right away, and they felt more comfortable by saying what they do in their entity, a lot of experience that they have in their own institutions. It was not planned that way, but that happened. And so the panel experienced more freedom, and later we asked the questions that you gave us to start the panel. And also in the panel, we discussed the questions. We took the questions in the chat box and we discussed several of those questions in a broad manner. The two panelists, both Diana and Margarita, did a great effort, and we would have easily talked for another hour, Mariana. We could have easily discussed another hour. When you said 5 minutes, we end in 5 minutes. We had to end quickly, but we would have easily talked for another hour. I finished by saying that for Red Camif and the Central American Conference, we hadn't been able to have them in Guatemala, and we hope that in Costa Rica you can be in there in the next conference. And Diana, could you tell us what you discussed in the room? A brief comment. A very interesting comment. The entire experience that Marisol shared with us in the room about how to integrate financial health in the development of financial and non-financial products and really understand the context of women. This is something that we have been discussing for a while, which is that we should not think about women as a standard group. There is intersectionality, and we need to understand the specific needs of each group of women in each country, in each geographic location, age groups, and so on, to guarantee a good supply of financial and non-financial products and services that lead to financial health. Financial health is the ultimate goal of financial inclusion, where we can guarantee that a woman can manage her finances and feel safe about her financial future. She can manage her finances, financial resilience, achieving her goals, and that confidence in the management of finances and the financial future. So I would say that this was the discussion with different specificities in terms of the approaches and highlighting the interesting experience of Marisol about the work of ProMujer. Thank you, Diana. A final message before we conclude? Thank you. I think that these are excellent summaries. I think that the conclusion is that we need to see the world in a holistic manner for women. We cannot discuss finances without taking into account education. In this case, we have also included the issue of health. This is the best recipe to get the best results and achieve the goals that we have and the goals that we have. Another thing that I believe is important is that women are not going to come to us. We have to go to them. We need to understand their need, the differences among countries, among the different groups, and so on. My last conclusion is that data is very important. Each of us play an important role in collecting data. Institutions like yours who are organizing this type of events, who are involved in financing a project, are a lot more important because you have more resources and have more data available for analysis, and so we can do a better job. Thank you. Thank you, Marisol, Diana, Mr. Walter, for these reflections, these thoughts. So we conclude day one of this forum. And we also want to invite you to accompany us tomorrow at 9 a.m. Central American Time, 10 a.m. Washington time. Tomorrow, we'll have a very dynamic day. We are going to start with a networking session with the colleagues who are participating so that you can get to know each other and exchange experiences in our event. And then we are going to have a main talk about the financial overview for women's development. And the moderator is Araceli Castillo, Executive Director of Red Camif. And we are going to have the experience of Bank CHO at Banco Sol and several women. And we are going to have working sessions on gender impact, on the development of products and services designed specifically for women, and another room on technological development and women. Without any further ado, I would like to thank you for today, for all the experiences shared. We hope that you can be with us tomorrow on behalf of Red Camif, Portal FinDev, and Andares Mujeres, FinEquity. We will be waiting for you tomorrow and the second day of this regional forum. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow.